The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the Riverside Police Department, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. 15-year-old Maya Rodriguez sat on the uncomfortable plastic chair, her backpack clutched tightly in her lap. Her dark hair fell across her face as she stared at her sneakers, trying to make sense of how a simple trip to the corner store had landed her here. It had started as such an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Maya had stopped by Henderson's Convenience store on her way home from school, just like she did most days. She needed to pick up some milk for her mom, who was working late again at the base. The little bell above the door had chimed as she entered, and old Mr. Chen behind the counter had given her his usual friendly wave. That's when she noticed the elderly woman struggling near the cereal aisle. The lady, probably in her 70s, was reaching up toward the top shelf where the oatmeal boxes were stored. She was barely 5 feet tall, and even on her tiptoes she couldn't quite reach what she needed. Maya didn't even think twice about it. Her mom had always taught her to help others when she could. "Here, let me get that for you," Maya had said, reaching up easily to grab the box of instant oatmeal. The woman's face had lit up with gratitude. "Oh, thank you so much, dear. These old bones just aren't what they used to be." The woman had chuckled, adjusting her glasses. "You're such a sweet girl." Maya had smiled and continued shopping, grabbing the gallon of milk and a bag of chips her little brother had requested. She'd paid Mr. Chen, exchanged a few words about the weather, and headed for the door. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But as she stepped outside, a police car was pulling up. 2 officers got out, and one of them called out to her, "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Maya had turned, confused. She recognized one of the officers, Officer Derek Thompson. He'd been to her school a few times for those community outreach talks that nobody really paid attention to, but he'd never looked at her the way he was looking at her now. "Is there a problem, officer?" Maya had asked politely, the way her mother had taught her to speak to authority figures. Thompson was a big man, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His partner, a younger guy Maya didn't recognize, stood slightly behind him, looking uncomfortable. "We got a call about shoplifting," Thompson had said, his voice already carrying an accusatory tone. "Someone matching your description." "Shoplifting?" Maya's eyes had widened. "But I didn't. I paid for everything. You can ask Mr. Chen." But Thompson wasn't interested in hearing her explanation. Before she knew it, she was being escorted to the police car while he made comments about these kids thinking they can get away with anything. The elderly woman she'd helped had tried to speak up, telling the officers that Maya had only been helping her, but Thompson had brushed her off, saying witnesses were often confused. Now, sitting in the police station, Maya kept replaying those moments in her head. How had helping someone reach a box of oatmeal turned into this nightmare? The station was busier than she'd expected. Officers walked back and forth, talking on radios, typing on computers, answering phones. The smell of coffee and something that might have been leftover pizza filled the air. Maya had never been inside a police station before, and despite everything, she found herself looking around with curiosity. Officer Thompson approached her again, this time carrying a clipboard and wearing what might have been considered a smile, if smiles could be cruel. "All right, little girl," he said, pulling up a chair directly in front of her. "Let's talk about what really happened in that store." "I already told you what happened," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I was helping an older lady reach something on a high shelf. Then I bought milk and chips. I have the receipt." Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, you have a receipt. How convenient. You know how easy it is to grab extra stuff after you pay for something. Else?" Maya felt her cheeks burning. "I didn't take anything. Why would I steal oatmeal? I don't even like oatmeal." "Maybe not oatmeal," Thompson said, leaning back in his chair. "But kids like you, well, let's just say I've seen this story before. Many times." There was something in the way he said "kids like you" that made Maya's stomach twist. She looked around the station, hoping someone else might step in, but the other officers seemed busy with their own work. "What do you mean, kids? Like me?" Maya asked quietly. Thompson's smile grew wider, and Maya realized it wasn't really a smile at all. Come on now, don't play dumb, you know exactly what I mean. Kids from your background, your neighborhood, probably learned it from your parents, right? I bet they didn't even come to this country legally. Maya's mouth fell open. She'd heard comments like this before, whispered behind hands at school or muttered by strangers when they thought she couldn't hear, but never so directly. Never from someone who was supposed to protect and serve everyone equally. My family is American, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was born here. My mom serves in the military. Thompson threw back his head and laughed, loud enough that several other officers glanced over. Sure she does, sweetheart. And I bet she's a general, right? You people always have these grand stories. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Her mother had always told her to be strong, to stand up for herself, but also to be smart about it. Getting angry wouldn't help her situation. Can I please call my mom? Maya asked. Don't I have the right to a phone call? Rights? Thompson chuckled again. Oh, you've been watching too much TV. This isn't some crime drama. You're a minor, and you're not under arrest. Yet. But don't worry, your mom will find out soon enough. Though she's probably too busy cleaning office buildings to answer the phone right now. The comment hit Maya like a physical blow. Her mother did work hard, sometimes pulling long hours, but not as a cleaning lady. Captain Maria Rodriguez was one of the most dedicated officers Maya knew, in any branch of service. She'd earned her rank through years of hard work, multiple deployments, and countless sacrifices. But Maya knew that explaining this to Officer Thompson would be pointless. He'd already made up his mind about who she was, who her family was, based on nothing more than her appearance and her last name. My mom will be worried if I don't come home, Maya tried again. She's expecting me. I'm sure she is, Thompson said, making a show of looking at his watch. What time does her shift end at the hotel? 9, 10? I bet she works multiple jobs, right? Gotta send money back home to Mexico? We're from Texas, Maya said quietly. And my mom doesn't work at a hotel. Thompson waved his hand dismissively. Texas, Mexico, same difference. The point is, little girl, you need to start telling the truth about what you took from that store. Make this easier on everyone. Maya looked around the station again, hoping someone would intervene. At the front desk, a sergeant was processing paperwork, occasionally glancing over at them with what looked like discomfort. A few other officers were having quiet conversations, but none of them seemed willing to step in. I keep telling you the truth, Maya said, her voice growing stronger despite her fear. I helped an elderly lady reach something on a shelf. I bought milk and chips. I didn't steal anything. The security cameras will show that. Thompson's expression darkened. Don't. Tell me how to do my job, kid. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a thief when I see one. And I know your type. All innocent on the outside, but you're just waiting for your chance to grab something when nobody's looking. The casual cruelty in his voice made Maya feel sick. She thought about her mother, probably finishing up her duties at the base, planning to come home and ask about Maya's day. She thought about her little brother, probably already worried because she wasn't home yet to help him with his homework. You know what your problem is? Thompson continued, clearly enjoying having an audience he could intimidate. No respect, no discipline, probably comes from not having a father around, right? Let me guess. He took off when things got tough? Or maybe he's in jail. That's usually how these stories go. Maya's hands clenched into fists in her lap. Her father had died when she was 8, killed by a roadside bomb during his second deployment in Afghanistan. He'd been a sergeant in the army, just like her mother. He'd died serving the country that Officer Thompson seemed to think Maya and her family didn't belong to. But she didn't tell Thompson that. Something told her that her father's sacrifice would just be another thing for him to mock or dismiss. Instead, Maya sat up straighter in her chair and looked Thompson directly in the eyes. You don't know anything about my family, she said quietly but firmly. Thompson leaned forward, his smile turning into a sneer. Oh, I know plenty. I know that kids like you think you can come into our neighborhoods and take whatever you want. I know that your parents probably told you that Americans owe you something, but let me tell you something. We don't owe you anything. And when you get caught stealing, you don't get to play the victim. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Maya could feel other people in the station listening now. Officer Thompson returned to his desk with a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Cop," a gift from his daughter that now seemed bitterly ironic. He glanced over at Maya, who was still sitting rigidly in the plastic chair, her backpack clutched, like a shield against her chest. The fluorescent light above her flickered occasionally, casting moving shadows across her face. "You know what?" Thompson called out loudly enough for half the station to hear. "I think we need to have a little chat about honesty." He pulled his chair closer to Maya, the metal legs screeching against the floor. Several other officers looked up from their work, and Maya noticed that the conversation level in the room had dropped. People were listening, even if they were pretending not to. "Let me tell you how this usually goes," Thompson said, settling into his chair with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the power. "First, kids like you try the innocent act, all wide-eyed and confused, like you have no idea why. You're here." Maya opened her mouth to respond, but Thompson held up his hand. "Then," he continued, "when that doesn't work, you start with the sob stories. Poor family, hard life, just trying to help your little brother or sister." "Am I getting warm?" "I wasn't going to," Maya began, but Thompson cut her off again. "And finally," he said with a theatrical sigh, "when all else fails, you start blaming everyone else. The store clerk who misunderstood, the customers who couldn't see clearly, maybe even the racist police officer who's just picking on you because of your background." The way he said the word racist made Maya's skin crawl. He drew it out, mocking it as if the very idea was ridiculous, as if the things he'd been saying for the past hour weren't exactly that. Thompson leaned back in his chair, obviously pleased with his performance. "So which stage are we at now, Maya? Still playing innocent or ready to move on to the sob story?" Maya looked around the room again. The desk sergeant was pointedly not looking in their direction, shuffling papers with unnecessary vigor. A female officer near the coffee machine had paused with her cup halfway to her lips, clearly uncomfortable with what she was hearing. But nobody was stepping forward to intervene. "I'm not playing anything," Maya said quietly. "I'm telling you what happened. I helped someone, I bought some things, and I came home, that's it." Thompson laughed, a sound that was becoming more grating each time Maya heard it. "Oh, that's right. You helped someone. Let me guess. A little old lady who couldn't reach something on a high shelf? How convenient, how noble." Maya felt her cheeks burn. It was exactly what had happened, but the way Thompson said it made it sound like the most ridiculous lie in the world. "And I suppose this little old lady will vouch for you, right?" Thompson continued. "Except, funny thing, when we talked to her outside the store, she seemed pretty confused about the whole situation. Couldn't really say for certain what she saw." Maya's heart sank. She remembered the elderly woman trying to speak up outside the store, trying to tell the officers that Maya had only been helping, but Thompson had brushed her off then, and apparently he'd convinced her to doubt what she'd seen. "She told you I was helping her," Maya said, but even to her own ears her voice sounded less certain now. "Did she?" Thompson asked with mock surprise. "Huh. That's not how I remember it. But then again, old people can get confused pretty easily, especially when they're dealing with language barriers." The implication hit Maya like a slap. Thompson was suggesting that the elderly woman, who had spoken perfect English in the store, had somehow been confused because of Maya's ethnicity. It was so absurd, so blatantly wrong that Maya almost laughed. "Almost? There was no language barrier," Maya said. "We both speak English perfectly fine." "Sure you do," Thompson said with exaggerated patience. "I mean, you speak it pretty well, for someone whose family probably just got here. How long have you been in the country? 5 years? 10? "I was born here," Maya repeated, her voice growing stronger despite her frustration. "In San Antonio, at the military hospital." Thompson's eyebrows shot up in mock amazement. "Military hospital. Wow, that's a good detail. Really adds authenticity to the story." Let me guess. Your dad was a soldier? Big, tough guy who served his country? Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her father had been a soldier and he had been tough and he had served his country. But the way Thompson said it made it sound like a joke, like a convenient lie designed to win sympathy. As a matter of fact, Maya started, but Thompson was already moving on. Or wait, let me try a different angle, he said, clearly enjoying himself. Maybe it was your mom who was the soldier. That would be even better, right? Single mom, military hero, raising kids on her own while serving America. That's a real tearjerker right there. Maya's hands trembled slightly. Thompson was describing her family's actual situation, but he was doing it in a way that made it sound like the most obvious fiction in the world. Every truth about her life was being twisted into evidence of deception. You know what I think? Thompson leaned forward conspiratorially. I think someone told you that military stories play well with cops. Someone gave you coaching on what to say if you ever got caught doing something you shouldn't be doing. Nobody coached me, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm telling you the truth. Thompson slapped his knee as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. The truth, right. You know what the truth is, Maya. The truth is that kids from your neighborhood don't just wander into stores to help random old ladies. The truth is that your family didn't just happen to end up in military service. The truth is that this whole innocent act is something you learned from watching too much TV. He stood up and began pacing in front of her chair, clearly warming up to his theme. You want to know what I think really happened? I think you went into that store planning to take something. Maybe you've done it before and gotten away with it. Maybe your friends dared you to do it, but this time someone noticed. Maya shook her head. That's not. And when you got caught, Thompson continued, ignoring her protest, you panicked, so you grabbed the first excuse you could think of. Poor little immigrant girl just trying to help someone. How could anyone suspect someone so innocent? The word immigrant hung in the air like an accusation. Maya wanted to scream that her family had been in Texas longer than Thompson had probably been alive, that her great-grandfather had fought in World War II, that her roots in American soil ran deeper than his assumptions could fathom. But she also knew that none of that would matter to him. Thompson stopped pacing and looked directly at her. You know what really gets me? It's the disrespect. Here I am, trying to help you understand the seriousness of your situation, and you just keep lying to my face, like you think I'm stupid. I'm not lying, Maya said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Right, Thompson said sarcastically. And I suppose your mom really is going to show up here in her military uniform demanding to know why her angel daughter is being questioned about shoplifting? Maya's eyes widened slightly. That was exactly what she was hoping would happen, but the way Thompson said it made it sound absurd. She might, Maya said quietly. Thompson burst into laughter, so loud that every person in the station turned to look. Oh, that's rich, that's really rich. Your mom's going to show up in uniform and save the day. What is she, a general? A admiral? Maybe a Navy SEAL? The other officers were definitely listening now. Maya could see them exchanging glances, some looking uncomfortable, others seeming amused by Thompson's performance. She felt heat rising in her cheeks, but not from embarrassment, from anger. She's a captain, Maya said, lifting her chin slightly. A captain, Thompson exclaimed, clapping his hands together. Even better, Captain Rodriguez to the rescue. I bet she has medals too, right? Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, maybe even a Medal of Honor? Maya's jaw tightened. Her mother did have medals, including a Purple Heart from her second deployment. But Thompson was making it sound ridiculous, impossible, like the idea of a Latina woman earning military honors was some kind of fantasy. You know what your problem is? Thompson said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. You think you can walk into my station and spin these elaborate stories and I'll just believe them, because I'm supposed to be politically correct. Well, let me tell you something. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I can spot a liar from a mile away. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes again, and this time she wasn't sure she could blink them back. Everything about her life, everything her family had worked for and sacrificed for, was being turned into evidence against her. Her father's service, her mother's dedication, their family's deep roots in American soil, All of it was being dismissed as elaborate fiction. "I can see those crocodile tears starting," Thompson observed with satisfaction. "Right on schedule. This is usually when kids like you start crying and begging for mercy. But you know what? Tears don't work on me. I've seen too many guilty people try to cry their way out of consequences." Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at herself for giving Thompson the satisfaction of seeing her emotional reaction. "I'm not trying to cry my way out of anything. I just want to call my mom." "Your mom?" Thompson repeated mockingly. "The military captain. Right." The heavy glass doors of the Riverside Police Department swung open with a gentle whoosh of air conditioning. The sound was barely audible over the general hum of activity in the station, but Maya looked up instinctively from her uncomfortable plastic chair. Her heart nearly stopped. Walking through the entrance was a woman in military dress uniform, the kind reserved for formal occasions and official business. The dark blue fabric was crisp and perfectly pressed, adorned with ribbons and medals that caught the harsh fluorescent light. The woman's posture was unmistakably military, shoulders back, spine straight, chin level, eyes forward. Every step was measured and purposeful. Maya's face transformed from despair to pure relief so quickly that it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "Mom," she whispered, though the word barely escaped her lips. "Captain Maria Rodriguez." Paused just inside the doorway, her trained eyes quickly scanning the layout of the station. She took in the desk sergeant's position, the locations of the officers, the general flow of activity. Her gaze found Maya almost immediately, and for just a moment her professional composure cracked enough to show a flash of maternal concern. But then her military bearing reasserted itself. She approached the front desk with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, her low-heeled dress shoes clicking rhythmically against the linoleum floor. Officer Thompson was still standing near Maya, mid-sentence in another monologue about kids these days, when he noticed that conversation in the station had suddenly died down. He turned to see what had captured everyone's attention, and his eyes fell on the approaching figure in uniform. For a brief moment, Thompson's expression showed confusion. The woman was clearly military. That much was obvious from her bearing and dress, but his mind was still processing the disconnect between what he was seeing and what he'd been assuming about Maya's family for the past 2 hours. "Captain." Rodriguez reached the front desk and addressed the sergeant with crisp professionalism. "Good evening, Sergeant Williams," she said, reading his nameplate. "I'm Captain Maria Rodriguez. I understand my daughter is here regarding some kind of incident." Sergeant Williams, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Thompson's behavior throughout the evening, straightened in his chair. He recognized the rank insignia immediately, and his demeanor shifted to one of appropriate respect. "Yes, ma'am," Williams replied, quickly shuffling through his papers. "Your daughter, Maya Rodriguez. She was brought in earlier regarding a possible shoplifting incident at Henderson's convenience store." Captain Rodriguez nodded once, her expression remaining neutral. "I see. May I ask why she hasn't been permitted to make a phone call?" "The school contacted me when she failed to arrive for her tutoring session, but I had to call around to discover she was here." Thompson, who had been standing frozen near Maya, finally found his voice, but his tone still carried the dismissive arrogance that had characterized his interactions with Maya, though perhaps slightly muted by the obvious military presence. "Oh, you must be Maya's mother," he said, walking over to join the conversation at the front desk. He gave Captain Rodriguez a once-over that was just barely professional. "I have to say the uniform is a nice touch. Really adds to the whole story." Captain Rodriguez turned to face Thompson fully, and Maya noticed that several other officers in the station had stopped what they were doing to pay attention to the conversation. There was something in her mother's stillness that reminded Maya of a coiled spring. "I'm sorry, officer," Captain Rodriguez said, her voice perfectly level. "Thompson," he replied with what might have been intended as a charming smile. "Officer Derek Thompson. I've been handling your daughter's case." "I see," Captain Rodriguez said. "And you referred to my uniform as a story?" Thompson's smile wavered slightly, but he pressed on. "Well, You have to understand, Captain. Rodriguez. Was it? We get all kinds of people in here making all sorts of claims. Just this afternoon, your daughter was spinning quite a tale about her military family. Captain Rodriguez raised one eyebrow slightly, a gesture Maya recognized as a warning sign. A tale? You know how it is, Thompson continued, apparently oblivious to the danger he was walking into. Kids think that military stories will get them out of trouble. My dad's a soldier, my mom's a general, that sort of thing. We hear it all the time. The silence that followed Thompson's words seemed to stretch for an eternity. Around the station, Maya could see officers trying to look busy while obviously listening to every word. Sergeant Williams had gone very still behind his desk. Officer Thompson, Captain Rodriguez said finally, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of command. Are you suggesting that my daughter has been fabricating stories about her family's military service? Thompson shifted slightly, beginning to sense that he might be on thinner ice than he'd realized, but still not fully grasping the situation. Look, I'm not trying to cause problems here. I'm just saying that kids will say anything when they're caught doing something wrong. The whole "my family serves our country" routine is pretty common. Captain Rodriguez took a step closer to Thompson, and Maya noticed that her mother's hands were clasped behind her back in a classic military at-ease position. I see. And what exactly has my daughter been caught doing? Well, shoplifting, obviously, Thompson said, gesturing toward Maya. Got caught red-handed at Henderson's store. Been giving me stories for the past 2 hours about how she was just helping some old lady. Have you reviewed the security footage from the store? Captain Rodriguez asked. Thompson waved his hand dismissively. Haven't needed to. The call came in, we picked her up, case closed. Look, Mrs. Captain, whatever you want to be called. I get that you want to support your kid, but she needs to learn that actions have consequences. It was at this moment that Sergeant Williams stood up from his desk. He'd been watching the interaction with growing alarm, and he'd finally recognized what Thompson was apparently too obtuse to see. Officer Thompson, Williams said carefully, perhaps we should review the security footage before. I've got this handled, Sarge. Thompson interrupted, not taking his eyes off Captain Rodriguez. Look, lady, I appreciate the whole military costume thing, but your daughter was caught stealing. You can parade around here in whatever uniform you want, but that doesn't change the facts. The words military costume hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around the station, Maya could see officers exchanging shocked glances. Even she, in all her 15 years, knew that Thompson had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Captain Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed that her mother's jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. Officer Thompson, she said, her voice now carrying the steel of absolute command, I think there may be some confusion here. The only confusion, Thompson replied, apparently determined to dig his hole even deeper, is your daughter thinking she can lie her way out of trouble. But don't worry, I've dealt with families like yours before. I know how to handle this situation. Families like mine? Captain Rodriguez repeated, and Maya could hear the dangerous edge creeping into her mother's voice. You know, Thompson said with a shrug. Immigrant families who think they can come here and take whatever they want. Kids who haven't been taught to respect authority. Parents who are probably working so many jobs they don't have time to teach their kids right from wrong. Maya watched her mother's face, seeing the moment when Captain Rodriguez's professional composure shifted from patient to coldly furious. It was like watching a switch flip. Officer Thompson, Captain Rodriguez said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her military authority. I believe you've made some serious errors in judgment this evening. Thompson, apparently still not recognizing the gravity of his situation, laughed. Errors in judgment? Lady, the only error here was your daughter thinking she could get away with shoplifting. Actually, said a new voice from behind them, I think the error might be yours, Thompson. Everyone turned to see Police Chief Robert Anderson approaching. From his office, his face grim. He'd obviously been listening to the conversation, and Maya could see that he was not happy with what he'd heard. Chief, Thompson said, suddenly looking less confident. I was just explaining the situation to Mrs. Captain Rodriguez, Chief Anderson interrupted, extending his hand toward Maya's mother. It's an honor to meet you, Captain. I've heard excellent things about your work with the community outreach program. Thompson's face went pale as the implications began to sink in. Chief Anderson knew Captain Rodriguez. Not only knew her, but clearly respected her. The honor is mine, Chief Anderson, Captain Rodriguez replied, shaking his hand with firm professionalism. Though I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Chief Anderson nodded gravely. Indeed, I think we need to have a serious conversation about what's been happening here tonight. Maya watched from her chair as the dynamics in the room shifted completely. Suddenly, Officer Thompson was no longer the authority figure dispensing judgment. Suddenly, he was looking very much like a man who had made a terrible mistake and was beginning to realize just how terrible it might be. But Captain Rodriguez wasn't finished. She turned back to Thompson, her metals catching the light as she moved. Captain Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her military bearing commanding the attention of everyone in the police station. The fluorescent lights reflected off her ribbons and medals, each one representing a story of service and sacrifice that Officer Thompson had dismissed as fiction just moments before. Officer Thompson, she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had commanded troops in combat zones. I believe you asked my daughter about her family's military service. Thompson's face had gone from pale to ashen. He could feel the eyes of every person in the station on him, and the weight of his mistakes was beginning to crush down on his shoulders like a physical force. Thompson stammered, for the first time since Maya had met him seeming at a loss for words. Captain Rodriguez continued in the same measured tone. She told you her father was killed in Afghanistan. That was Staff Sergeant Diego Rodriguez, 101st Airborne Division. He died on his second deployment when Maya was 8 years old. His convoy hit an IED while providing security for a humanitarian aid mission. Maya felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from relief. Finally, someone was telling the truth about her father. Finally, his sacrifice was being honored instead of mocked. She told you that I serve in the Army, Captain Rodriguez continued. I am currently stationed at Fort Sam Houston, where I work as a liaison between military medical services and civilian emergency response teams. I've served 3 tours overseas, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Thompson opened his mouth, as if to speak, then closed it again. Around the station, Maya could see officers straightening up, their expressions shifting from curiosity to respect as they began to recognize the significance of the woman standing before them. Chief Anderson stepped closer, and Maya noticed that he too was looking at her mother's uniform with new attention. Captain, if I may ask, what are some of those decorations? Captain Rodriguez glanced down at her ribbons briefly. Purple Heart, Bronze Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Commendation Medal, Combat Medical Badge. She paused, looking directly at Thompson. I received the Purple Heart when my field hospital was attacked during my second deployment. I was treating wounded soldiers when the shrapnel from a mortar round caught me in the shoulder. Sergeant Williams had come around from behind his desk, and Maya could see the recognition dawning in his eyes. Captain Rodriguez, he said quietly, weren't you featured in that article in Army Times last year? About the medic who saved those civilians during the Kandahar incident? Maya felt a surge of pride. Her mother rarely talked about her deployments, but Maya remembered that article. It had described how her mother had left the safety of her medical station to treat wounded civilians caught in crossfire, working under enemy fire to save lives. Captain Rodriguez nodded once. That was a team effort, Sergeant. Many people showed courage that day. Thompson was staring at the floor now, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. The woman he'd been mocking as a probable cleaning lady was not only a decorated war veteran, but apparently a hero whose actions had been written about in military publications. Officer Thompson, Chief Anderson said sternly, I think you owe Captain Rodriguez and her daughter an explanation for your conduct this evening. Thompson looked up slowly, his face flushed with embarrassment and what Maya hoped was shame. Captain, I apologize. I made assumptions that were inappropriate. Captain Rodriguez studied him for a moment. Officer Thompson, my daughter, told you she was born in San Antonio at the military hospital. She told you her father was a soldier. She told you I serve in the Army. She told you these things because they are true. What assumptions did you make that led you to dismiss all of this as lies? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya could see Thompson struggling with how to answer, probably realizing that any honest response would reveal the prejudices that had driven his behavior all evening. I thought, Thompson began, then stopped. I didn't think. You didn't think what? Captain Rodriguez pressed gently but firmly. You didn't think a family with a Hispanic surname could be military? You didn't think my daughter was telling the truth because of how she looks? You didn't think I could be a decorated officer because of your assumptions about people like us? Thompson's silence was answer enough. Chief Anderson's face was grim. Officer Thompson, have you reviewed the security footage from Henderson's store? Thompson shook his head miserably. No, sir. I didn't think it was necessary. Well, let's remedy that right now, Chief Anderson said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling the store owner. If there's footage of tonight's incident, we're going to watch it together. While Chief Anderson made his call, Captain Rodriguez walked over to Maya's chair. For the first time since entering the station, her military composure softened slightly as she looked at her daughter. Are you all right, mija? She asked quietly, using the Spanish endearment that Thompson had probably assumed Maya's family used because they couldn't speak English properly. Maya nodded, wiping away tears that were now tears of relief. I tried to tell him, Mom. I tried to explain about Dad, about you, but he wouldn't listen. Captain Rodriguez placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. I know you did. You did nothing wrong. Chief Anderson finished his phone call and approached them. Mr. Chen is bringing the security footage over right now. He's also bringing the customer who was in the store when the incident occurred. The elderly woman Maya was helping. Thompson looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Chief, maybe we should just… No, Chief Anderson interrupted sharply. We're going to watch this footage, and we're going to see exactly what happened. Because based on what I've witnessed, here tonight, Officer Thompson, you've made some serious errors that go far beyond just failing to investigate properly. While they waited for Mr. Chen to arrive, other officers in the station began to approach. Maya noticed that they were looking at her mother with obvious respect, and several introduced themselves to thank her for her service. Captain Rodriguez, said Officer Jennifer Walsh, a young officer Maya hadn't noticed before. I just wanted to say thank you. My brother served in Afghanistan with the 101st. He always said the medics were the real heroes over there. Captain Rodriguez accepted the thanks graciously, but Maya could see that her mother's attention was focused on the bigger picture, not just clearing Maya's name, but addressing the systematic failures that had led to this situation. 20. Minutes later, Mr. Chen arrived with a laptop containing the security footage and an elderly woman who looked familiar to Maya, the customer she'd helped in the store. This is Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen announced. She was in the store when everything happened. Mrs. Patterson, who appeared to be in her 70s, looked around the police station with sharp, intelligent eyes. When she spotted Maya, her face lit up with recognition. Oh, there she is, Mrs. Patterson exclaimed, walking directly over to Maya. Are you all right, dear? I tried to tell these officers that you were just helping me reach the oatmeal, but they didn't seem to want to listen. Thompson's face flushed an even deeper red. Here was the witness he'd dismissed, the woman whose testimony he'd ignored because it didn't fit his predetermined narrative. Let's watch the footage, Chief Anderson said grimly, setting up Mr. Chen's laptop on a nearby desk. Officers gathered around as the security video began to play. Maya watched herself on the screen, entering the store, nodding to Mr. Chen, then walking toward the aisles. The video clearly showed her approaching Mrs. Patterson, who was reaching unsuccessfully toward the high shelf. It showed Maya helping her get the oatmeal box, showed Mrs. Patterson's grateful smile, showed Maya continuing with her own shopping. The footage continued, showing Maya paying for her milk and chips, chatting briefly with Mr. Chen, then heading for the door. At no point did the video show her taking anything without paying for it. At no point did she behave in any way that could be construed as suspicious or criminal. When the footage ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Well, Chief Anderson said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I think we can safely say that no crime was committed here tonight, except possibly the crime of gross negligence in police procedure." Thompson was staring at the laptop screen as if hoping the footage might somehow change if he looked at it long enough. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "I want to know why nobody listened to me when I tried to explain what really happened. That young lady was nothing but helpful and polite. She's a credit to her family." Captain Rodriguez nodded to Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for speaking up for my daughter." "Speaking up?" Mrs. Patterson huffed. "I tried to speak up hours ago, but this officer here told me I was confused and didn't know what I saw. Well, I may be 73 years old, but I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid." Chief Anderson turned to Thompson, his expression thunderous. "Officer Thompson, you ignored witness testimony, failed to review available evidence, and spent 2 hours subjecting a minor to what I can only describe as harassment based on your own prejudicial assumptions. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Thompson looked around the room desperately as if searching for some. The conference room at the Riverside Police Department had never felt smaller to Maya. She sat beside her mother at a polished wooden table, facing Chief Anderson and 2 other officials she'd been introduced to, but whose names she was still trying to remember. One was from Internal Affairs, a serious-looking woman with kind eyes. The other was some kind of community liaison officer. It had been 3 days since the incident with Officer Thompson, and Maya was still processing everything that had happened. The immediate aftermath had been a whirlwind of apologies, paperwork, and promises that this sort of thing would never happen again. But Maya was learning that real change took more than just promises. Chief Anderson cleared his throat and opened a manila folder. "Captain Rodriguez, Maya, I want to thank you both for coming in today. I know this has been a difficult time for your family, and I appreciate your willingness to help us address the serious problems that came to light on Tuesday evening." Captain Rodriguez nodded professionally. She was wearing her regular Army uniform today, not the dress uniform from that night, but her presence still commanded respect. "Chief Anderson, my primary concern is ensuring that no other family has to go through what we experienced." "That's exactly what we want to discuss," said the Internal Affairs investigator, consulting her own notes. "We've completed our preliminary review of Officer Thompson's conduct, and frankly, what we've found is deeply troubling." Maya shifted in her chair, curious despite herself. She'd been wondering what would happen to Thompson, whether he'd face any real consequences for his behavior. "Officer Thompson has been with the department for 18 years, the investigator continued. During that time, he's received 7 formal complaints regarding discriminatory behavior. 7. Most were dismissed or resulted in minor disciplinary action. Captain Rodriguez's jaw tightened slightly. 7 complaints, and he was still allowed to interact with the public? Chief Anderson looked uncomfortable. "Captain, I'll be honest with you. This department, like many others, has historically not taken these types of complaints as seriously as we should have. We've treated them as isolated incidents rather than recognizing patterns of behavior. And now?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Now we're implementing comprehensive changes," Chief Anderson replied. "Officer Thompson has been terminated. Additionally, we're instituting mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all officers, conducting a review of our complaint procedures, and establishing a civilian oversight board." Maya felt a mix of emotions at the news of Thompson's firing. Part of her was satisfied that he'd faced consequences for his actions, but another part of her wondered if firing one officer would really change anything, or if there were others like him still on the force. "What about the other officers who were present that night?" Captain Rodriguez asked, as if reading Maya's thoughts. Several of them witnessed Officer Thompson's behavior and said nothing. The question hung in the air uncomfortably. Maya remembered the desk sergeant who had avoided eye contact, the officers who had pretended not to hear Thompson's comments. "That's something we're addressing as well," Chief Anderson admitted. "We're implementing new protocols that require officers to intervene when they witness inappropriate conduct by their colleagues. Failure to do so will result in disciplinary action." The community liaison officer leaned forward. "Captain Rodriguez, we'd like to invite you to help us develop these new training programs. Your experience both as a military officer and as someone who's experienced discrimination firsthand, would be invaluable. Maya watched her mother consider the request. She could see her mom weighing the time commitment against the potential for positive change. "I'd be willing to contribute," Captain Rodriguez said finally, "but I have conditions." "Name them," Chief Anderson said immediately. "First, this can't be a one-time training session that officers sit through once and forget. It needs to be ongoing, with regular reinforcement and accountability measures." Chief Anderson nodded. "Agreed." "Second, the training needs to include real scenarios and consequences. Officers need to understand that their assumptions and biases can destroy lives and undermine community trust." "Absolutely." Captain Rodriguez looked at Maya, then back at the officials. "And third, we need to include community voices in this process. People who've been affected by police bias need to be heard, not just talked about." Maya felt a surge of pride at her mother's conditions. She was turning their terrible experience into something that could help others. "Actually," Maya said quietly, surprising herself by speaking up, "I'd like to help too." Everyone at the table turned to look at her. Maya felt her cheeks warm, but she continued. "I mean, I know I'm just 15, but I think officers need to hear from young people too. They need to understand how their words and actions affect us." Captain Rodriguez smiled at her daughter. "Maya, you don't have to." "I want to," Maya interrupted. "What happened to me was wrong, but if talking about it can prevent it from happening to someone else, then maybe some good can come from it." Chief Anderson nodded approvingly. "Maya, I think that's an excellent idea. If your mother approves, we'd be honored to have your perspective in our training programs." Over the following weeks, Maya found herself in a role she never could have imagined. She worked with her mother and the police department to develop scenarios for training sessions, sharing her story with groups of officers and community members. The first training session was held in the same conference room where they'd met with Chief Anderson. Maya stood at the front of the room, looking out at 25 officers, some young, some experienced, all paying careful attention to what she had to say. "3 weeks ago," Maya began, her voice stronger than she'd expected, "I walked into Henderson's convenience store to buy milk and chips. I helped an elderly customer reach something on a high shelf. I paid for my items and left. Those are the facts." She paused, making eye contact with several officers in the audience. But Officer Thompson didn't see those facts. He saw a Hispanic teenager and assumed I was a criminal. He saw my last name and assumed my family were immigrants who didn't belong here. He heard about my father's military service and assumed I was lying. Maya could see some officers shifting uncomfortably in their seats, and she was glad for their discomfort. Discomfort meant they were thinking. "Here's what Officer Thompson didn't see," Maya continued. "He didn't see that my family has been in Texas for 4 generations. He didn't see that my father died serving this country. He didn't see that my mother has medals for saving lives under enemy fire. He didn't see any of that because he'd already decided who I was based on how I looked." After the training session, several officers approached Maya to thank her for her courage in speaking out. But the conversation that meant the most to her came from Officer Jennifer Walsh, the young woman who had thanked her mother for her service that first night. "Maya," Officer Walsh said, "I need to apologize to you too. I was on duty that night, and I heard some of what Officer Thompson was saying to you. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't speak up. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere." Maya studied the young officer's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "Why didn't you say anything?" Officer Walsh looked down at her hands. "Because I was scared. Thompson was a senior officer, and I'm still new. I was worried about making waves, about hurting my career." She looked back up at Maya. "But I realize, now that my silence made me part of the problem." Maya nodded slowly. "What would you do differently now?" "I'd speak up," Officer Walsh said without hesitation. "I'd call him out, even if it was uncomfortable, because what happened to you was more important than my career concerns." These conversations became a regular part of Maya's life over the following months. She spoke at community meetings, participated in police training sessions, and even testified. before the city council about the need for police reform. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came 6 months later, when Maya was walking home from school and saw a police car parked outside Henderson's convenience store. For a moment, she felt her old anxiety return. But then she saw Officer Walsh getting out of the car and an elderly man approaching her. Maya watched as Officer Walsh listened patiently to the man's concerns, treated him with respect and dignity, and helped resolve whatever issue had brought him to the store. It was exactly how policing should work, officers serving the community, not intimidating it. That evening at dinner, Maya told her mother about what she'd witnessed. "I think it's working, Mom," she said. "The training, the new policies, all of it. I think we're actually making a difference." Captain Rodriguez smiled at her daughter. "You know what the best part is? You found your voice through all of this. You learned that you have the power to create change, even when the system seems stacked against you." Maya nodded, thinking about how much she'd grown since that terrible night in the police station. She'd learned that standing up for what's right wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. She'd learned that her voice mattered, that her story had power, and that even teenagers could help create meaningful change in their communities. The following year, Maya was invited to speak at the State Police Academy's graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at a